how is the South Africa's economic sector looking like? South Africa's economic sector has got basically 4 main sectors, which starts with the primary sector. From the primary sector, we proceed to the secondary sector. From the secondary sector, we go to the tertiary sector, and then you look at the quaternary sector. These 4 sectors are the main sectors that are making up the South Africa's economy. However, there's always another 4th sector that is 5th sector that is added there. Sector number 5 that is always added there is the Queenary Sector. But you need to know, what does each of these sectors mean? Okay. So the economy of South Africa runs on those different sectors. In this case, we have what they call the primary economic sector. The primary economic sector, basically, what does it talk about, or what does it deal with? This sector deals with the extraction of raw material from nature. We extract raw material from nature, in other words, or from the environment. Such activities whereby you go and extract raw materials from the environment, we call it primary sector. In other words, there is no processing, there's no turning raw materials into a final product. The only activity is you get the raw material from the environment or from nature. Such activities include farming, fishing, mining, forestry, tree logging, extraction of oil, stone quarrying, all those activities primary activities. So when you look at the primary activities, you just remember that, wherever there is primary, it's the starting stage, extraction of raw material from nature. Okay, so you must be in position to remember these activities that we have here. Okay, that is primary. All right, then from primary, we have another activity that follows. That is the secondary activity. This activity here. This activity, which you call the secondary activity, which means it is dealing with the changing of the raw material into a useful or a finished product. In other words, if here in the primary, you were getting raw material from nature and you don't process it, that means here there is processing of raw material so that you can get a final product. Sometimes you find out that this secondary sector deals, sometimes others call it this manufacturing sector, or the sector where there is manufacturing of goods. In other words, you add value to the raw material such that you can have a final product. You produce a final product. In this case, these activities deal that processes or change raw material into useful product or useful goods. Processed goods are sometimes referred to as value-added goods. You add value to those goods. For example, we have these activities here. Metalworking is an activity that is under secondary sector. Smelting, there is automobile production, textile production, chemical and engineering industries, aerospace manufacturing, energy utilities. We have engineering, breweries, bottlers, construction, and shipbuilding. All those activities are under secondary. You are turning raw material into a final product. I also want to use another example. Sugar is a product that you get from sugarcane. Sugarcane, when it is still in the farm, it is that activity. When you're in the farm, you're cultivating, you're doing all the activity is primary. So that sugarcane is then squeezed. You take the sucrose out, you take it to the factory, they make for you sugar. The sugar that is made out of sugarcane is in the sector which you call secondary sector. So you can see what we mean here. Here you have manufacturing, okay? You are processing raw materials and you make a product out of that, okay? Then, sorry. Then we proceed and look at something else, which we're talking about now. The secondary, the next activity after secondary activity is what we call the tertiary activity. When you look at the tertiary activity, we are basically focusing on that activity that deals with the provision of a service. Okay, and now in this case, if you have looked at this as a secondary, then we go to tertiary, meaning that it is the activities that involve provision or distribution of what? Of services to businesses, to consumers, etc. Okay, for example, transport, telecommunication, hospitality, public health services, tourism services, media services, that is radio and television, health services, waste disposal services. In other words, something that is important in our life, we need it in our life, but we don't really see it, we don't even detach it, but you need it, it adds value to you. I will use the same example. Sugarcane in the farm is under primary. Taken to the factory, they make for you sugar is under secondary. But they don't sell sugar in the factory. Sugar is taken to shops, to ShopRite, to Pick and Pay, to any other shop that is selling that final product. But you must know that that product that is taken there, it uses transport. There are some people who transport the sugar to the factory, to the shops, to say Pick and Pay, to say ShopRite, and so on. So those products that are taken there, or when the products are taken there, those people who are transporting, they are providing a service. So their activity falls under tertiary activity. You go to the doctor when you're sick, you get medical attention, or you get treated, you get better, you come back when you're okay. So doctors provide the service, teachers provide the service, lawyers provide the service. It is going to benefit you, you'll feel better, but you don't even touch it, you just appreciate what is done, and then you move away. And you normally, you know very well that there's nothing for free. You even sometimes pay for that service. However, if it's provided by the government, you know that it's the government that pays. Okay. So we go on and look at another activity, which you call another economic sector, which is now the quaternary sector. The quaternary sector, or the quaternary economic activity, these activities basically deal with the higher provision level of the service. In other words, it is information and technology. It's sometimes, to make it a little bit easier, we say it is a sector that deals with the research. People go think of something whereby they come up with something that is new, something that is improved. So that one is going to fall under quaternary sector or quaternary economic activity. Under those activities, what do we see? We have ICT, we have consultancy, we have research. I'll go back to the same activity. We talked about sugar. We started from sugarcane from the farm, which is primary. We talked about it in the factory, which is whereby they manufacture for you sugar, and we say that is secondary. We talked about the people who are transporting sugar to the shop. We know those ones who are selling, we call them cashiers. They are at the till selling for you, or you go buy sugar, they sell to you the sugar. So those ones are providing a service. But we also know that there are sometimes when they need to come up with innovations. Take an example. You find out that sugar basically grows very well where we have enough rainfall. And then that's why you see most of the sugarcane is grown in KZN, because KZN receives over 1,000 millimeters in a year. So when you look at that area where sugarcane is grown, they can think of how can we improve the product? How can we make sure that the productivity or the processing of sugar does not stop? So they start thinking of how they can do these things. So they do research. They go to offices, they take their research, they came up with new inventions, and then they improve the productivity. So you find out that through that, they come up with, let me say, genetically modified seeds and so on. That can also help to have a proper product or a better product. In that case, that sector where there is research done, technology, it is under what we call Quaternary Sector. So it is basically a research. Okay, this is a research. Then the research and technology and information, we have ITC here. So you look at what happens in the globally, what is new, what needs to be improved so that we can equate ourselves to other countries that are producing the same product and is on the same standard. So you have to research globally, you have to use internet, you have, now that's this sector that deals with this is what we call Quaternary Sector. Now, the last sector that I can talk about that is not here, but it is also important is what we call the Queenary Sector. So with the Queenary Sector, what does it do? The Queenary Sector, basically, it deals with decision making. You see, these ones are doing research, they come up with something new, but they don't make decisions. The decisions are basically, let me say, made by some other bodies. For example, judiciary, they take decisions, okay? For example, the government. So you do research, you find out something new, and then the government says, yeah, you have to wait for it to be approved, okay? So that it can be now operating or it can be in the market. So under that line, all the sectors that deals with decision making is falling under this Quinary activity. It's not part of, it's not here, but it is also another sector that is very important. So we must know that as learners, that are these sectors important? Yes. That is when we are going to look at its contribution to the GDP. But before we look at its contribution to the GDP, let us understand what is GDP. GDP, first of all, it stands for gross domestic product. P stands for product. Okay, so if it stands for gross domestic product, what does it mean? We look at the total value of goods and services that are produced within a country in a particular year. Okay, so we say that if you look at those goods and services that are produced in a country, what is the contribution? Which one contributes more? Do you think the primary sector contributes more? Do you think the secondary sector contributes more? Or it is the tertiary sector that contributes more? You understand? So when we analyze this, we need to understand its great contribution to the GDP of the country. Okay, in that, by understanding its contribution, you will know whether it has declined, whether it has improved, and so on and so forth. So when you look at the primary activities that are taking place, take an example, mining, we have mining, we have agriculture, all taking place in the same province. What is its contribution? In this case, you find out that that is primary. Then when you look at this is just looking at the different provinces and their contribution to the GDP. Let us just try to analyze this graph. Look at this. You know very well that Gauteng is basically known for industries. So it contributes basically in that case. And that's why they are saying, according to this, it is the biggest contributor to the national grid or to the economy of South Africa. Okay, so we look at that and we understand that GDP contributes the highest to the, Gauteng contributes the highest to the GDP of South Africa, and the Free State contributes the lowest to the GDP according to this. But now when you look at this, look at Free State, it contributes 5%, then followed by Northwest, which is 6%. We have Limpopo, which is 7%, in Mpumalanga, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, KZN, and we also have Gauteng. Those are the different 9 provinces and their percentage contribution to the national grid. Okay, so all these ones have got different activities taking place in these different sectors. Even these activities are taking place there, but you find out that which one contributes more. We need to understand that. Now, by just bringing in this aspect, look, Primary sector contributes 11.4%. Secondary sector, in this case, it has its contribution of 7.4%. Tertiary sector contributes 3.0%. Okay, and all those are different sectors. When you look at them, look at this contribution of the secondary sector. This is just recent, 2019. There was a general decline in the secondary sector production of South Africa, which declined to this. So manufacturing, look at this. Now that this is the average contribution of the secondary sector. Okay, then we also have the tertiary sector, which talks about, in other words, tertiary service, trade, transport, finance, all those personal services, government, they contribute this much, okay, to the economy of South Africa. Okay, now by looking at those different sectors, you need to know which one contributes more, which one contributes better, what is its value, and so on and so forth. So here we are saying the contribution of the secondary sector, or the contribution to South Africa's economy by value between 2019 and 2020. If you remember 2020, we had a very big setback of COVID-19. So there was some factories closed down, some shops closed down. So that means all the sectors of the economy were now being affected. This is what is happening. They say that in 2020, look at the statistics. In 2020, we look at each sector's contribution as it is measured in percentage. Okay, look at that. This is construction, and we said the construction is under which sector? Look at electricity. Okay, look at agriculture, look at financial, look at government, trade, manufacturing, transport and communication, mining, personal services, extra. In this case, you see that finance contributed 20%, which is the biggest contributor, and finance is under the tertiary sector. Okay, government, it's under the tertiary sector. Trade, it's under the tertiary sector. So you will find questions, learners, that are saying, calculate the total contribution of the tertiary sector. That means you must be in position to tell which one is a service. Yeah, personal service is a service, financial service, government service, trade service. So you add them up, transport and communication service. You add them up, and then you come up with the percentage and to know which one contributes more. This is according to the statistics that came out in 2020. Okay, then sorry. Sorry. Besides that, we have besides that, sorry for that. Besides that, we look at another graph here. We need to analyze another graph that we have here. The graph that we have here is showing the relationship between GDP and unemployment rate between 2010 and 2020. So this one is analyzing. You can see that this shows the GDP growth and unemployment 2020. You see how many people were unemployed, how many people were employed. 1 million people lost jobs in 2015. You understand? Now, this one is trying to analyze how the flow was in relation to the GDP. In other words, you know very well that if people are unemployed, that means they contribute less to the GDP. When people are employed, they will be working, and therefore they will contribute to the GDP. Okay, so under that line, you must understand, learners, that what just shows how things are happening. Remember, in this section of economic geography, there is a lot of graphs that are used. Okay, there is a lot of graphs that are used. There is a lot of graphs that are used, and these graphs are very, very, very important. So you must be in position to learn how to interpret the graphs. It might be a pie chart, it might be a bar graph, it might be a line graph, and so on and so forth. So that is the issue that you need to understand, good people. So here I have some of the activities that I would love learners to test themselves. Okay. And the answers are down there, but I don't want to check the answers. I want you to look at these questions and see if you can answer them. Which mining is an example of economics of which economic sector? Which one is mining? Think about it. I want, if in any case you can write your answer somewhere down and you test yourself, then when I tell you the answer, you just tick yourself. That will be better. It will be okay if you assess yourself under that line. Mining is an example of this activity. Which activity? You know very well that mining falls under primary sector. Okay. Then we proceed. The sector concerned with the provision of a service is which sector? You see, questions are not so difficult and you can answer them. Of course, that is a tertiary sector. The extraction of raw material from the earth's surface, which is which sector, that one? It is also a primary sector. Concerned with the processing of raw material, processing. The moment they talk about processing of raw material, automatically that is secondary sector. Okay. Provision of electricity is an example of which sector? Is still secondary sector. The manufacture of textile, footwear, and clothing, which sector is that? Secondary sector. It contributes the least the GDP of South Africa of the economy. That is the primary sector. Okay. So you must be in position to understand these aspects. Okay. So some of you wonder, why is it the primary sector contributes less? You know very well that some of you or most of you look at the primary sector and consider it as a dirty sector. Data sector for dirty people. Dirty, you know, you go to the garden, you come when you're very dirty and so on and so forth. So a few of them go there. And some of you immediately you graduate, you get your degree or your diploma, whatever, you go into the cities to look for a job. You're looking for a job to be employed. You understand? But which sector? No one will go to look for a job in a farm. No one will go to look for a job somewhere they dealing with farming and so on. No, you all want to go and work in offices and so on. You want the tertiary sector. So you find out that the tertiary sector basically employs more people than any other sector. Okay. Now, the primary sector of South Africa contributes 5% of the formal employment. 5%. Look at 50 plus million people, and they say 5% are only the ones that are employed in this sector. That is very few people, and the number is still decreasing. Can you imagine? So very few people are employed in this sector. Very few people are working in that sector. The reason being, I've told you that this sector is considered to be a dirty sector because you go, you work in the farm, you look at yourself like as if I'm not educated. So whoever is educated wants to go and work for someone else. Okay, so it provides work for casual laborers and contributes about 2.6% of the GDP for the nation. Due to the aridity of the land, only 13.5 can be used. Can you imagine? Can be used for the production, and only 3% is considered a high potential land. So if you look at this 3%, only 13 is being used. Where's the rest? The rest is less productive because it is very dry. So you find it contributing less. Okay. Under this primary sector, there are very many activities that we're supposed to look at. Take an example. Under this, there is farming, and under farming or agriculture, we know very well that agriculture is the growing of crops, rearing of animal, and poultry. So when you talk about growing of crops, that is basically farming, arable farming. You go grow crops. Then beef farming or animal keeping. Those are animals when you are rearing animals. Take an instance, the animals that are reared here, we have these different provinces are basically rearing cattle. For example, in Popo, basically we have a lot of them in Northwest. There are very many in Free State, KZN, Eastern Cape. All those provinces are basically known for animal rearing. And now when you we proceed and look at these other provinces, say Gauteng, say Northern Cape, those are very, very dry areas. Look at Western Cape. They basically don't keep animals, or few of them keep animals. So their contribution is a little bit less. Okay, so South Africa needs to ensure a healthy agricultural industry that contributes to the country's gross domestic product. Okay, you know very well that we say the GDP will look at the value of goods produced in the country in a particular year. We say that agriculture needs to contribute more, or it needs also to improve its production. Remember, where there is no agriculture, there is no food, food insecurity, social welfare is going to be a problem. Jobs will not be there. And also, we need to depend on this sector for the sustainability of the country. So in that case, we see farming practices must be there, not only to protect the long-term productivity of the land, but must also ensure profitable yields and the well-being of farmers and farm workers. You know very well that on those big farms far away, where we have one house, a farmstead, you know that it is not safe. People feel that they are not safe to go and work on the farms. So they need this to be improved so that they can improve the welfare of the farmers. In the same line, we know that if there is agriculture and it is well catered for, food won't be a problem. Look at this. Most of the chicken that South Africa enjoy is coming from Brazil. Okay. So if it is coming from Brazil, what does that mean? It simply means that as if you cannot rear chicken here so that you can have chicken. But we know that most of it is coming from those other countries. Okay. Then we proceed and see, just still on that point of beef farming, this table here is showing the grazing capacity. When you look at Eastern Cape, I want you to look, long-term grazing capacity available. This is what is available under here, natural yields or natural fields, and this is what is the lowest, the mean, and so on. We find out that in most of these provinces, some of them don't even have. Look at Western Cape. Okay, I want you to look at Gauteng. There's nothing. Do you understand? Less. So their contribution. This is just analysis of the table as based on the statistics of 2013 and 2014. Okay. So what does that mean? It simply means the table shows the area of grazing capacity in South Africa from the high grazing capacity to the low grazing capacity. Western Cape, Northern Cape, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo have the lowest grazing capacity. Okay, most especially Mpumalanga and Limpopo has the low grazing capacity. That means less animals are kept there. But now, looking at all those aspects, we need to know, why is beef production greatly improving, or how can it greatly improve, or what factors are behind the development or the production of beef? First of all, we are saying that we have a vast and extensive grazing land. It's a lot. I want you to look at the areas of Western Cape and Northern Cape. They have less, but I want you to look at the areas of KZN, Free State. Those are the areas where most of the animals are kept. So some of you learners, you just say grazing land. The moment you say grazing land without this word here, it means that what the question is going to be, what about the grazing land? Okay, what about it? What's wrong with the grazing land? So in order for you to acquire marks, remember in geography, we don't explain like the way it is well explained, like paragraphs and so on in history. That's why you see our paragraphs, they say in a paragraph of 8 lines, explain, you understand? 8 lines. But when you're writing a paragraph question, let me say the question is coming, it comes and says in a paragraph of 8 lines, explain the physical factors, or explain the factors that favor beef production. That is general, factors that favor. But if the question says physical factors, that means you only look at the physical, like what? Like grazing is physical, climate is physical, you understand? This one is physical, all those ones are physical. But now when they say the factors are favoring the development of agriculture or beef production, then you don't need to be specific. everything can be included, but it is always preferably to start with physical factors. Then you go to other factors. But now, when you're explaining these factors, you make sure that you put a proper qualifier. For example, grazing land, it's either extensive or very big land or vast land where they can keep their animals. So when the moment you use vast or extensive land for keeping of animals, for example, in the high fields, then it simply means that you'll get all your 2 marks. But if you explain, if you just write and they want you to explain it or to write it in details, and when I just say grazing land, then it doesn't make any sense. What about the grazing land? What's wrong with the grazing land? So you have to tell us that the available grazing land or the areas with the grazing land is very extensive, it's very big, so that it favors the keeping or the growing of animals, encouraging beef production. Then we'll talk about the favorable climatic condition for the breeding of cattle. In other words, they can easily be bred using this climate, which is not so cold, it's not so warm, it's just mild, just there, in favoring the breeding of animals. Now they can easily multiply, okay, and the more they become, that means the more beef we shall produce, which is a factor favoring. Then you look at reserves such as the hay and the silage, so that so they can conserve surplus forage in the times of dry season. I want you to, I think you remember very well that South Africa experiences mainly seasonal rainfall in the interior, or as a country experiences seasonal rainfall. So in the interior, you know very well that during summer, that's when the country experiences its rainfall. It's most of its rainfall. And winter, there is less rainfall. So what will happen if we don't have rainfall that can favor the growth of pasture for animals? So they have to have reserves of this hay and silage. So this hay, I think you have seen, it is always dry grass that they roll and keep they store it somewhere, and then during that dry season, they just take it, wet it a little bit, make it consumable by animals, and they won't suffer too much during the dry season. So those reserves they have helps them much more. It helps them well for them to come up with what? With to be in position to keep animals, to continuously keep animals in that sense. Okay. The introduction of communal farming, okay, for the utilization of the same land. We know that with the communal farming, it simply means that there is keeping of animals. Communal grazing simply means the keeping of animals, like no one owns it. No one owns the land. The land is communally owned. If it's communally owned, it simply means wherever, so long as you're a member of the community, you can easily keep your animals. Instead of people having individual areas, and that limits where animals can be grazed. Take an example. One person owning around 10 hectares, but the other person is not having. And maybe that person is willing to keep those animals. It becomes a problem, and that basically discourages the keeping of animals. So in this case, animal care, the introduction of communal farming, togetherness, people come together and they keep their animals. So this helps them to utilize the same piece of land for both crops and for livestock. And this helps to improve or to favor the development of beef production. Okay, so it favors beef production in the area. Another aspect is the provision of subsidies. This is basically done by the government, okay? And what does the government do? The government provides subsidies for the purchase of the breeding stock and the dosing product. So you find out that some farmers don't have enough money. They might be in position, or they might want to do the work, they might want to be there, they might want their things to be done very well, but unfortunately, they do not have the facilities. They are not capable to do such. So what does the government do? The government subsidizes. It lowers their prices, okay, such that those ones who have some kind of money and can afford they can go for it, and that favors production of beef instead of people not having and they leave it. So the government itself is encouraging, it's positive, it's contributing to the development of beef production. Okay. And lastly here that we are going to look at is basically what we call the veterinary services. When we talk about veterinary services, the availability of the veterinary services, we look at that animals can't die if they get sick or if they get pests, if they don't have, if the breeds are not good, what can they do? So these veterinary services, they are in position, they are there, and they can assist in the improving of the quality of the animals, keeping them healthy, and that helps the productivity of beef to continue. So the continuity is going to be there because the veterinary services there. Imagine you have your animals that are sick and you don't even have someone to treat them. The veterinary services are not there. So because they are there, it simply favors the continuity of the growing or the keeping of the keeping of the production of beef in the country. So these are the factors. But as in this case, learners, I want you to be in position to extract out which ones are natural or physical and which ones are human or other factors. Take an example. Grazing land is natural. Okay. Favorable climate is natural. Okay. Communal farming, this one is not natural. It can be human or other factors. Subsidies, this is human. Okay. Veterinary. So these two here are natural. Okay. So I want you to be in position to extract out, because in most cases, learners are failing these exams because they cannot even differentiate between natural factors or human factors from natural factors. They can't differentiate physical factors from human factors or from other factors. Okay. So I want you to be in position to tell human factors, what are they? In other words, we look at the human contribution. There is no interference there with nature. It's human who's coming up with those innovation reserves, communal farming, subsidies, veterinary. So that is communal. But grazing land, if it is there, it is there. You can't create it. Available climatic condition. If it's arid, it's arid. You can't change it. So you find out that those are natural factors which are not having any human contribution. So besides the factors favoring beef production, we also need to look at the factors hindering. The word hinder simply means discouraging beef production in South Africa. It retards, it stops the prosperity of the production of beef. In other words, it slows it down. What are those factors? Those are the factors we shall look at. Okay. So those factors that hinder beef production, they include lack of the camp systems to protect the livestock. Now that's livestock, if they leave them to graze and go into different areas, sometimes they end up not being protected, and this discourages the production of beef. We have drought prevalence. You know that South Africa is basically having the problem of water. A lot of months when there is no water, there is a lot of drought. So this drought limits affects animals, because you find out that animals don't have water. That means that will affect the production of milk. Okay, and then the animals themselves won't look healthy, which is affecting basically beef production. So drought is a serious problem in South Africa. The persistent drought in South Africa that is due to the areas receiving unreliable rainfall or limited rainfall amounts. Take an example of what is happening in Northwest, what is happening in Eastern Cape. You understand? Those provinces, Northern Cape, it's a serious challenge of drought. This affects production of beef. Then we have increased the costs. The costs are too high, and these costs reduces the profit margins. of the farmers. This discourages other people who want to join the sector, and this discourages those ones who are already there because they are operating at losses. They are operating at losses. So there is increased costs, feed costs in times of drought. So most especially during the drought, they have to make sure that they make ends meet. Animals need to feed, but the pastures are not there, natural pastures are not there, so they have to make plans. And by doing so, they are incurring in a lot of what? A lot of costs. This reduces their profit margins, and it reduces the output. Okay, so another hindrance or another problem is the poor veterinary services. Sorry, the poor veterinary services, our veterinary interventions, cattle on being vaccinated, not being vaccinated. We know that yes, we say that veterinary services are there, okay, they are there, but their services are not that perfect. There is that gap that is in between there. So you find out some animals can't be vaccinated, so they die, the calves die when they're still young, and this affects the production. And therefore, because of such losses or such problems, farmers end up leaving the sector. So that's those discouraging factors. Another thing that insufficient breeding stock for beef cattle. Like most of the animals that we can have for beef, and normally they need to be exported, or the breeds are exported from other countries, so that you can have those breeds here. And that is costly. It requires a lot of money, and many of the farmers don't have that money. So we know that these breeds of cattle are insufficient. That means they are not enough. And because they are not enough, it affects the production of beef, or it lowers the production of beef. Okay. There is another serious problem, and this is a very serious one, which we know as the what? The high cost of fuel and transportation. Fuel is a serious challenge. Fuel prices are very, very high. And because they are very high, you find out that the money that you would waste, or small money that you would put in, you end up putting in a lot because the fuel prices are high. And you know that fuel prices affect prices of other commodities, and this affects farmers directly, because at the end of the day, farmers won't cope up with those fuel prices, and they can't transport their products to the market centers, and this ends up discouraging them and forcing others to leave the sector. Okay. Another challenge that we have there is lack of equipment, especially among the small scale farmer. You know that if you're a small scale farmer, you don't have enough capital to use. Small scale farmers, they don't have enough capital to use. They employ family labor. Do you understand? So they don't have enough money to buy these equipments that they need. Maybe you need a spraying machine, or maybe you need to come up with a proper farm, maybe to preserve your beef or to preserve your milk. But because you don't have money to buy all those equipment, you end up operating in losses. So such problems, lack of those equipments, it ends up discouraging farmers. It ends up affecting the productivity. Okay. Another challenge that we have is diseases that lead to death of animals. This is a serious challenge. Actually, I want to also add here pests and diseases that attack the cattle, and then these cattle across the country, and eventually many of them die, coupled to the poor veterinary services, coupled to the poor services they have, or coupled to the lack of money and so on. This leads to losses to farmers, affecting the production of beef. Another factor that we have is increase in the stock theft and the pilfering, that is stealing of in small numbers on a continuous basis. You know very well that on those big farms where they have animals, most of those animals, if they are not well protected, people just come, they steal them, Imagine you have kept the animals, or you have kept the cattle for about a year or 2 or 3. You have incurred in a lot of costs for it to be alive, for it to be okay, to be healthy. But on maturity, or on the time when you want to now benefit from that cattle, they steal them. That is a serious problem. Theft is a serious problem. Okay, so such problems are affecting beef production, and farmers end up shunning away from this kind of activity. Another one is insufficient or declining grazing land. Previously, it was a lot of land where they can extensive, but it is declining steadily. It is reducing. Why? It is because of increased population, that now those people require land where they can settle. They end up occupying the areas that could be used for grazing. So under that case, we're seeing that because of this human settlement expansion, people needing space to settle, people needing land to put up structures for settlement or for them to stay in, they end up occupying the area that was used, or that could be used for grazing of what? Of animals. Or in such scenarios, farmers end up finding out that the land that they had before is no longer the same land they have now. And that affects the productivity, or that affects beef production. Meaning that if, let me say, you had 10 hectares where you can graze your animals, and now because of population increase, people have occupied about half of it, and now you have 5. That means if you're supposed to grow, that means to keep around 50 heads of cattle, you can't keep the 50, you'll keep 25 because you don't have enough. Man, that means at the end of it all, the production of beef is going to decline. Okay, that is another thing, or another aspect. And lastly is poor or no access to credit for expansion. When we talk about no access to credit, it simply means some of these farmers don't have enough security if they go to these financial institutions. So let me say you don't have enough capital for you to use while in this sector. And now, who are those ones who can borrow you money? It's the financial institutions, the banks. And then when you go there, you don't have enough mortgage or securities that you can give them. So they end up, and they also, based on the problems that the farming sector has, most especially changing weather conditions, it can easily affect productivity. And because it can affect productivity, it's financial institutions are not sure that you'll be in position to pay back what you have taken. And that ends up not giving them securities to give you credit, or to give you bonds, or to give you financial assistance. And that is basically affecting beef production. So in all, those are some of the factors that are affecting or that are hindering the production of beef in South Africa. But we know that despite the fact that beef production is affected, it doesn't mean that it is not contributing to the GDP, it's not contributing to the economy. It contributes to the economy of South Africa. Number one, we need to look at these contributions. What are the contributions? In other words, what are the benefits? How important is it to the economy of South Africa? So we know that the beef can be exported to the international market. And when you export them to the international market, what is the effect? What is the effect? So if you export them to the international market, that means many people will be employed. Okay, that means there will be foreign exchange. So export is developed. Now that this is trade is developed. Okay. Another thing is that high beef consumption within the country across the major market segments. So it contributes to beef production, consumption of beef. Beef is a very important aspect, or it is very important in our economy, or in South Africa's economy, because if beef is available, it's a source of food. So beef production contributes to food security in the country. Okay. Another one is sustained increase in rand value because of the continuous exporting of beef product. Year in, year out, the land value goes up in comparison to the US dollars. And that helps to keep the economy growing faster and very well. So land value is maintained due to the exportation of beef every year. Sorry. So farmers keep on producing beef, keep on producing beef, keep on producing beef. And this basically helps in contributing to the GDP as well. A higher turn-up value on investments. So you know that if there is beef production, of course, in business, no one can stay in business if it is only on losses. Okay. It is it's an investment. Okay. So because it is an investment, it simply means they make a lot of profits. So you know very well that in any business, okay, in any business that you do, if you are making profits, you keep in that business. That means if you make profits, that money can be invested anyway. Okay. And that means if you invest that money in any way, you are contributing to the development of the country. Therefore, the higher return value on investment is increasing, which is a very good thing. Talk about employment. Okay. Talk about employment, talk about people earning income, okay, and being in position to sustain their families, etc. So all those aspects are now talked about in this country. In other words, the beef contribution is very high, South Africa's economy. Okay. Now, in this case, I want to integrate some of the map work aspects or beef production on the map. Look here, somewhere here we have a map. This map you see here, I want to integrate it. It's saying map integration of beef production in Mporeni region, which is KZN. Okay, look, triple a beef farm, it is here. Then beef transportation to the market. Okay, then we have grazing land on the farm. These are the areas where they graze animals, drinking ponds and the reservoirs, those are there. Then we have the farm bends, which are here now. So in this case, what do we understand? We know that because maybe of beef production, infrastructures will be constructed. Remember, they need to transport these market products or the beef to the market center. So they have to establish infrastructures. So you'll see that if there are roads that are there, and you can interpret it that if they ask, let me say, the factors that contributes to the development of beef production, there is a transport and communication, well-developed transport and communication, extensive fields or extensive farms. These are the farms that are available for the growing of animals. Then we have provision of water from the rivers. Okay. Then we have the so-called drinking ponds and reservoirs that are built up to provide water for those animals. So in that case, we are looking at all those aspects and we are interpreting them on the map. Okay. So beef farming can also be interpreted on the map, or agriculture can also be integrated in the map. But in this case, when you look at this map, there's a road here. And when you look at all these beef farming areas, these are farming areas, they are all close to the transportation routes. They are where we have a very gentle area, okay, where animals can easily walk, graze, and so on and so forth. They are where there is water. So, in other words, if they ask for the factors, even if they ask physical, even if they ask humans that have contributed to the development of beef farming, we have the aspects to handle here, okay, which is a very good thing, right? Now, I have this activity, I have this extract that I would love learners to go through, okay? I have this extract that I would love learners to go through. You read it very well, interpret it very well, and then you'll be in position to answer the questions. Take an example. 2020 and beyond, a vision for the South Africa's beef industry. Okay, on the 7th of December 2017 by Riod Phillips. It's saying in 2016, South Africa became a net red meat exporter for the first time, supplying mainly the chief beef market. Can you see that? Here is saying net red market exporter. That means net red meat exporter. It's exporting red meat, that is the fresh meat from that is cut, not preserved, not processed, and to the what? To the market in 2016. In 2016, global red meat export mounted to about 9.6 million tons. Brazil led the way, exporting around 1.6 million tons, and or 19.6% of the total. South Africa ranked 15th, which is not bad, okay? Which is not bad, at around 60,000 tons, okay? Or 0.6%. Then the world 6% of the world total. All right. So that is the production. So in other words, I want you to go through this extract. Read it very nicely, and then you answer these questions. Okay, you answer those questions, including the paragraph questions. See, so you go through the extract, you answer the questions. So when I come next time, we are going to start from here. So you see, most of the questions that are asking from this extract, answers are for free. Marks are for free because answers are got from the extract. Rarely will you get the answers from there, apart from most especially the last question that requires you now to put some of your knowledge, but basically everything is in the extract. So I want you to read the extract, okay? I want you to read the extract, and on reading that extract, you answer the questions. So when I come back, I'll start by giving these answers, and you mark yourself. And then from there, we shall proceed. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.